Hi, my name is Benny, and I like hanging out in the garage. Last time I showed you the breakfast nook. I cut out a table, hung a light, glued a bunch of corks down. Seemed like so much more at the time. Now we're making the mold and pouring the epoxy for the tabletop. Okay, here's our mold. It was made, the bottom base piece is the outside circle that we cut when we cut out the tabletop. I had a piece of trim from the old workbench and I sliced that up and I glued all the pieces around the edge to make it taller. On top of that, I did a few layers of painter's tape to make a wall. And then I covered the floor and the sides, the whole thing, with packing tape to seal it in and make it less sticky to the epoxy. On top of that, as a release agent, I used car wax and I put it all over the place. That's a tip that I found online, and that's what we're going with. Now, the epoxy that I'm using for this is the Total Boat Tabletop 2-part epoxy. It's different from the deep pour epoxy, which I think goes up to like 4 inches on a pour. Something about dry time or heat dissipation or something. If you want to do a deeper pour with the basic tabletop epoxy, you have to do it in smaller layers, which is what I did with corks. A friend of mine who's done epoxy before, he gave me a couple of tips and he recommended a couple of brands. But then when I was looking those up, I ended up going with the Total Boat because one, the price was right around the same. And also, a few of the other YouTube channels that I watch all use the Total Boat, and a couple of them I'm sure are sponsored by it. So if Total Boat is supporting YouTube channels, then I'm happy to use it. This is a 2-part 1-to-1 mixing ratio epoxy. That's 1-to-1 by volume. If you're mixing by weight, there's a different set of instructions that come with it because the 2 parts don't weigh the same. When you mix the 2 together, first thing you'll see is that it becomes cloudy right away, and that's the chemical reaction starting. It almost looks kind of pearlescent as you're stirring it around. You don't have to stir it hard, fast. You don't have to put a mixer on a drill. You don't need to whip a bunch of extra air into it. Nice and easy, nice and slow. The instructions say 2.5 to 3 minutes of mixing, and then they want you to let it sit for a minute. You'll see that the more you mix, it gets clearer and clearer. And you'll see streaks as you move around or scrape the edges. And slowly but surely, all those little streaks and all that cloudiness will go away, and that's when you know it's fully mixed and fully ready to pour. It should be totally clear. The first layer was just a little skim layer. I had to fill up around the edge that goes down past the base of the table, and then I drizzled some down in between the corks to glue them in place firmly and get everything set for later on when the pours were going to be a little bit thicker. Now with the tabletop epoxy, you can pour up to 1/4 inch per layer. And you can pour the next layer as soon as the heat has dissipated off the previous layer. After each pour, there's some very tiny little bubbles that will form on the surface. You go along with a heat gun and you can just watch them pop like little speckles. It takes them all away. Mix, pour, heat gun, wait. Mix, pour, heat gun, wait. That was the pattern for a couple of days. When I got to the top layers, pouring the clear epoxy on the hardened clear epoxy made it kind of hard to see if you got it all there. So I ended up using a spreader just to make sure I hit everywhere. A couple of things I should have done differently that I've learned on this is one, the epoxy does a great job of getting all the air bubbles out. The ones that are there are because these are corks and they're porous and filled with air. What I should have done was after the epoxy layers were about halfway up the corks, I should have painted a thin layer over everything to seal the rest of them. And that would have saved me some trouble later on. Now I know. So the other thing I did was I'm using these 1 pint, 16 ounce mixing cups, which were great for most of it when I was pouring in the corks, going around. If I needed more for the edge or everything, I just mix up a second cup, pour it in. What happened was when I got to the top layers where it's covering everything, 1 cup wasn't really enough. So I mixed up a second cup and poured it in. But by then, the first cup was a little thicker. So they didn't mix and self-level as much as if I had just mixed 2 cups and poured them together. I should have done that. Well, I'll know better for next time. Right now, I think it's time to try and bust this thing out of the mold. I made a thing, a big thing, an awesome thing. Oh, I love this thing. The epoxy's crystal clear. Couple little blemishes. There's one. Couple little bubbles. There's a couple. Nothing that isn't fixable. Oh, it looks so good. Really, I was kind of nervous about this. I'm so happy with the way it turned out. Oh, it's awesome. If I owned a giant casino, this is what my chips would look like. All right, you remember this. I'm going to use it to trim the edge. We don't need it this thick anyway. It was originally spaced for a different type of border that I thought I was going to do that I can't do. So we're going to bring that in. It's going to also smooth off the edge. It's going to save a lot of sanding and stuff for me. So, that is as deep as that little bit on this router will go because of the added distance of this plate on here. I could have just barely done it, but now I don't want to take this off and change that. So if I gotta just go with regular bit, I'll go with a bearing bit and see if I can get deeper that way. This edge is good. It'll sand down and polish out nice. Router actually cuts this pretty smooth. I turned it down really slow for the very last pass. I didn't want any blowout along that top corner edge. But everything will be good. Now we got, oh, so nice. So nice. Now, while I got the router out and before I finish cleaning up, I want to round this top edge just a bit. Yeah, that's good. All right, I got some 240, I got some 320, and then we're gonna go to wet sanding, and I got some steps all the way up to 5,000. I don't know if we'll need to go that far, but we'll see. So we did 250 and 350 grit on the DA sander, and then we went up in steps. What do we got? We got some 600, we got some 800, 12, 15, up to 2,000 grit. Wet sanding the tabletop. It puts the lotion on the skin, or else it gets the hose again. At some point I need to do the trim. Shake, shake, shake. Shake, shake, shake. Shake your pain can. Shake your pain can. That's that. I think it turned out really well. The chairs, they look great. They cleaned up really well. I got them adjusted so they sit nice flat on the floor. The table here came out great. We've actually been using it a couple of days now since I finished it, and it doesn't scratch real easy or anything. It seems pretty durable. Joan loves it, which is the most important part. Her friends are already asking her, oh, is there a this brand, or is there a this brand, or this is the wine we used to drink, or whatever. And so she's looking around to find different corks. She loves the little accessories that I made to make it more Café J. A couple of things. The Total Boat Tabletop Epoxy. Absolutely fantastic. It was everything it said it was and everything I wanted it to be. I would use it again on my next epoxy project in a heartbeat. It polishes up great, super clear. So the top is what I was most worried about, and it turned out great as far as I'm concerned. The trim turned out okay. Café J is open for business. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. Cheers. Does anybody work here? Fine, I'll get it myself. That's strong coffee.